My name is Hamza, and for years, I devoted my life to teaching the Quran. From childhood, I was convinced I was following the only true path. By the time most kids were still learning multiplication tables, I had already committed huge portions of the Quran to memory. In my community, they treated me like a prodigy. Men at the mosque would shake my hand with admiration, calling me a Hafiz, as though I carried a crown on my head. Life at home revolved around one thing: obedience to Allah. There was no discussion, no choice, no questioning. My father enforced strict discipline, my mother kept quiet, and every day was structured around the masjid, prayer, and reciting scripture. By the age of 19, I was already instructing younger children, teaching them to read and repeat verses exactly as I had been taught. I wore my white thobe proudly, believing it was a badge of honor. I stood before others, reciting passages from memory, explaining them the way they had been explained to me. But I never allowed myself to ask questions. In my world, to doubt wasn't just rebellion against religion, it was betrayal of family, culture, and identity. Everything seemed steady until one day, a boy named Bilal raised his hand. His small eyes looked up at me with innocence and confusion as he asked, "Teacher, why does Allah permit men to strike their wives?" He was pointing to Surah An-Nisa 434, a passage I had repeated countless times but never allowed myself to really face. The words caught in my throat. I muttered the explanation I had been trained to give, that it was only symbolic, a gentle tap, a form of discipline never meant to cause pain. But when I returned home that evening, I couldn't shake it. I opened the Quran, reading the verse again and again, desperate for clarity. I examined the Arabic. I compared 3 translations. I dug into tafsirs, line after line, searching for a hidden meaning. But the conclusion was always the same. The verse permitted a husband to strike his wife. The authority of the man was unquestionable. I sat on the edge of my bed that night with trembling hands, the Quran resting open on my lap. A whisper escaped my lips. Could this truly be from God? I wanted to believe there was another explanation, that somehow all the scholars were wrong, that the truth was different than what I was reading. But deep down, I knew. The realization crushed me. That night, I couldn't sleep. My thoughts wrestled with the God I thought I knew, the scripture I thought was flawless, and the doubts that had grown from whispers into deafening shouts. It felt as if I had stumbled upon a poisonous seed planted deep within the book I was raised to honor. Still, I buried my doubts, forcing myself to silence the questions. I fasted longer. I prayed harder. I begged Allah to remove this confusion from me. But the peace I once found in prayer was gone. Days later, as I was preparing lessons, I came across another verse, Surah At-Tawbah 9:29. Fight those who do not believe in Allah or the last day until they pay the jizya with willing submission and feel themselves subdued. My heart dropped. Was this mercy? Was this justice? My mind flashed with images of my Christian neighbors, families who had only ever shown kindness to us. I thought of Daniel, my childhood friend, the boy who once gave me his jacket when I was freezing at school. Were these the people I was commanded to fight, to humiliate, to force into submission? I couldn't reconcile it. Still, I went to class. I stood before the students. But when it came time to explain that verse, I skipped it. My lips moved, but my spirit resisted. The words felt hollow, empty. And in that quiet resistance, something deep inside me began to crack. It wasn't dramatic, like an explosion. It was subtle, like a door slowly closing behind me. I was beginning to lose my faith. Not because I wanted to, but because I could no longer carry its weight. Once that crack appeared, I couldn't ignore it anymore. Quietly, secretly, I started searching for answers. I opened my laptop late at night, switching to incognito mode, deleting my history so no one would ever suspect. I read testimonies of former Muslims, articles from scholars outside of Islam, and posts from people who had walked this same road of doubt. What struck me was the pain in their words, the same pain I felt in my chest. I realized I wasn't alone. Then one evening, I stumbled upon a YouTube video titled, "Ex-Muslim Quran Teacher Shares His Story." I clicked. The man on the screen looked like me. He spoke like me. He recited the same verses I had. But then he said something that shook me to my core. I didn't leave Islam because I hated God. I left because I wanted truth more than tradition. Truth over tradition. That phrase echoed in my head like a bell I couldn't unhear. That night, I closed the Quran gently and whispered my very first prayer that wasn't in Arabic. God, if you are real, if you are truth, then show yourself to me. Even if it costs me everything, I just want to know you. I had no idea then that God would answer, but not in a way I expected, and certainly not without cost. In the days that followed, I continued living the same outward life. I still went to the masjid, still led prayers, still taught the children. But inwardly, something had shifted. It was as if I was wearing a mask that no longer fit. My lips moved to recite words, but inside my soul was crying out for answers. Every verse I once cherished now felt like a riddle I couldn't solve, or worse, like a wound I couldn't ignore. I began skipping Friday khutbahs, telling people I wasn't feeling well. I withdrew, locking myself in my room, avoiding my father's eyes. But he noticed. One evening, he looked at me and said, "Hamza, your light is fading. Maybe you're under attack from a jinn." He meant it. He wasn't joking. To him, doubt wasn't a natural human struggle, it was demonic. But I knew better. My battle wasn't with unseen spirits. It was with truth itself. Late at night, unable to sleep, I found myself scrolling through a Christian discussion forum. I wasn't seeking to convert. In fact, I didn't even trust Christians. My whole life, I had been taught they were misguided, cursed, lost forever. But their words, they were different. They spoke of a God who was near, a God who desired relationship, not just obedience. Then I read one simple line that froze me in place. Jesus doesn't want slaves. He wants sons. Sons. That single word pierced me. All my life, I had only ever seen God as a master and myself as a servant. Fear had always defined my worship. Even paradise felt like a reward for perfect performance, never a relationship of love. But what if I was wrong? What if God wanted something deeper? The questions rushed in like a flood. Why does Islam describe Allah as unknowable? Why were we taught to repeat, Allah knows best, instead of seeking closeness? Why did the Prophet marry a 9-year-old child? Why were apostates sentenced to death? For the first time, I let the questions live instead of silencing them. One night, trembling, I opened the Bible online. I didn't know where to begin, so I started with the Gospel of John. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The poetry, the power, it gripped me. Then I read, "The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us." My heart raced. My lips whispered the words out loud. God became flesh. Tears welled in my eyes. I didn't fully understand it. I didn't fully believe it. But something deep within me stirred, something I couldn't ignore. That very night, I had a dream. I was standing in a white, empty room. A single chair sat in the center. A man dressed in white sat silently, looking at me. Then he rose, walked toward me, and said words that shattered me. "Hamza, I know you." I woke up gasping for air, my pillow soaked with tears. For the first time in years, I felt seen. But I couldn't tell anyone. Not my parents. Not my brothers. Not even my closest friend, Ahmed. He would have reported me to the sheikh immediately. So I carried it alone, suffering in silence. And in that silence, I kept reading, kept listening, kept searching. Night after night, I returned to the Bible in secret. I downloaded sermons with trembling hands. I listened to testimonies of others who had walked away from Islam, and my bedroom slowly became my sanctuary and my battlefield. The more I learned about Jesus, the more I began questioning everything I thought was unshakable. Not just Islam, but my identity, my pride, my fear of rejection. One night, I sat at my desk and wrote a letter, though no one would ever see it. It was addressed to God. If you are the God of the Bible, the God who became flesh, then I want to know you. Not just follow rituals, not just recite prayers 5 times a day. I want to know you, but I am terrified. I don't want to lose my family. I don't want to be alone. Please, show me what to do. That same week, I came across a video of a former imam who had become Christian. His words pierced deeper than I expected. The Jesus of the Bible isn't just a prophet. He is God in the flesh, and he came to set captives free. Captives. That's what I was, a prisoner to fear, to religion, to cultural expectation. I didn't know yet what freedom looked like, but I knew I was desperate for it. I began distancing myself from rituals. I stopped attending prayers at the masjid as often, though I pretended otherwise. Outwardly, I still wore the mask. Inwardly, I was crumbling. My father often reminded me, "You are my pride, Hamza. You carry the honor of our family name." I knew if he ever discovered the truth, that I had even opened a Bible, he would disown me completely. One afternoon, when the house was empty, I gave in to the pull of my hidden phone. I opened the Bible app and went directly to a verse that had been echoing in my mind. John 14, verse 6. "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Those words hit me like a storm. It wasn't presented as an option among many. It was an absolute claim. Jesus was saying he was the only way. I read it over and over, each time feeling something inside me breaking apart and then reshaping itself. I was still staring at the verse when I heard the gate slam outside. My younger brother had come home earlier than expected. I quickly shoved my phone under the pillow, heart racing. Later that evening, he barged into my room without knocking. His face was stern, his voice cold. "What were you reading today?" I froze. My chest tightened. He continued, "I saw something on your phone. Don't lie. You know if I tell Baba, he'll beat you. Maybe he'll throw you out." My hands trembled. I whispered, "I'm not doing anything wrong." But his tone sharpened. "Reading their book is haram. You know you're playing with fire." In that moment, I saw it in his eyes, fear, anger, and shame all twisted together. He looked at me as though I had already betrayed everything we were taught to be. I begged him not to say anything. He told me he would think about it. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, whispering one desperate sentence again and again, "Jesus, if you are real, help me." The next morning, my nightmare became reality. My father stormed into my room before dawn, his face red with rage. My brother had told him everything. "Are you a kafir?" he shouted. "You bring filth into this home? You spit on the Quran." I tried to explain. I told him I was only curious, that I hadn't rejected him or our family. But he wouldn't hear it. His hand cracked across my face so hard that my ears rang. He hurled my books across the room, his voice thundering, and then stormed out. From that moment, my life changed. My phone was confiscated. I wasn't allowed to leave the house. My room became a prison cell. No one spoke to me. Not my brothers, not my mother, not even my cousin who once called me his best friend. To them, I was already gone. For 3 days, I lived in silence. I wasn't beaten again, but the isolation was worse than any strike. My father told neighbors that I was spiritually ill, that he was disciplining me back to truth. They thought they were saving me. But inside, I already knew I had been set free. On the 4th night, something happened that would seal my decision. I dreamed again. I was walking in a desert, dry and desperate for water. Suddenly, a man appeared, radiant like the sun. I couldn't make out his face clearly, but he came close, knelt beside me, and placed a cup of water in my hands. "Drink," he said softly. I did, and immediately I felt alive, more alive than ever before. I woke up with tears streaming down my face, and I knew then I couldn't hide anymore. The dream in the desert changed everything. I couldn't pretend any longer. I had to leave, not just the house, but the system, the cage, the endless cycle of fear and silence. I had already been speaking online with a Christian man in secret. Weeks earlier, he had told me there was a safe house run by believers, a place where people like me could hide. After that dream, I knew I was ready. I told him I wanted to escape. He gave me the address. All I had to do was find the courage to get there. 2 mornings later, while my father was at prayer, I slipped a few things into an old backpack and crept out through the back gate. I didn't even take shoes. I ran barefoot through alleys and side streets until I reached a road where I hailed a taxi. My heart pounded the entire way. When I finally arrived, before I could even knock, the door opened. A woman with kind eyes smiled and whispered, "Welcome home, brother." I collapsed into her arms, sobbing like a child. For the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid. I wasn't looking over my shoulder. I was safe. At the safe house, I had nothing, no money, no family, no clear future. But I had peace. The days were quiet but heavy. I spent hours alone in a small room with nothing more than a mattress and a Bible. At night, guilt crept in like a thief. I replayed my father's anger, my mother's silence, my brother's cold eyes. I asked myself, had I betrayed them? Or was I finally being honest for the first time in my life? There was no easy answer, but in the stillness, I began to heal. I read the Gospel of Luke every morning. Some passages left me confused, but others cut through me with power. Love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. I couldn't stop crying when I read that. For years, I had been taught to despise. To believe Christians had corrupted their scriptures. To see Jews as enemies of God. To imagine non-Muslims as nothing more than fuel for the fire. But Jesus didn't speak like that. He spoke of forgiveness, mercy, and love. And that was exactly what my heart longed for. Soon, I began joining small Bible studies with other ex-Muslims who, like me, had fled their homes. Some were barely teenagers. Others were middle-aged, hiding with death sentences on their heads. We didn't need to share every detail of our stories. The pain in our eyes was enough. We were the forgotten, the unwanted, and yet the free. One evening, the pastor who ran the safe house sat with me on the porch. He was an older man, calm and steady, the kind of presence that made you feel secure just by sitting beside him. "Hamza," he said gently, "I know you're still searching. That's all right. But understand this. Jesus isn't waiting for you to fix yourself before you come to him. He already took the first step. All he wants is your heart." I didn't answer. My throat was tight. He leaned closer. "If you're ready, we can pray together. No pressure, just an invitation." I nodded slowly. That night, for the first time, I prayed to Jesus. My words were clumsy, not eloquent, but they were mine. "Jesus, I don't know everything about you, but I believe you are the Son of God. I believe you died for me. I want to give you my life. Lead me, heal me, help me." When I said amen, something inside me broke wide open. It felt like a flood of warmth rushing into my chest. It wasn't just emotion. It wasn't just relief. It was deeper, like I had finally come home. The pastor had tears in his eyes, too. He smiled and whispered, "Welcome to the family." That night, I slept with peace in my bones. Real peace. Not the kind I forced during empty rituals, not the fake calm I pretended to feel on a prayer mat, but peace that came from knowing I was seen and loved exactly as I was. In the weeks that followed, I began unlearning and relearning. I had to retrain my mind to think without fear, to speak without filtering every word, to live without bowing to a system of shame. Trauma clung to me. Sometimes when I heard the Adhan echo from a nearby mosque, I would flinch. But I didn't bow anymore. I didn't belong to fear. One day, I stood before a small group of believers at Hidden House Church. My voice shook, my hands trembled, but I told them everything. About the verses that haunted me, about the dream in the desert, about the mask I had worn for so long. When I finished, they clapped, not out of celebration, but out of solidarity. They had lived the same story, in their own ways. That week, I was baptized in a river nearby. The water was cold, my body shivered, but when I rose from it, I felt lighter. A man hugged me and whispered, "Your old life is buried, brother. You've been raised with Christ." And I wept because it was true. I was no longer the Quran teacher everyone admired. I was no longer a slave to fear or approval. I was a child of God. And for the first time in my life, I was free. It's been 2 years since I left everything behind, 2 years since I walked away from the religion that raised me, the family that once praised me, and the life that defined me. I haven't heard my father's voice since the day he struck me and called me a disgrace. My mother called me only once. Her words were short, heavy like a stone. "You are dead to us. May Allah deal with you." Then the line went silent. I sometimes replay that moment in my head, wondering if she cried after hanging up, or if she simply erased my number and let me go. I'll never know. I used to believe their approval was my lifeline. Now I pray they too will one day encounter the truth. The memories still haunt me at times. Some nights I wake drenched in sweat, hearing Quranic recitations in my dreams, feeling the weight of my old life trying to drag me back. But those dreams no longer control me. They're just echoes, shadows of a prison I no longer live in. Today, my life is radically different. I spend my days doing something I once thought impossible, telling the truth. Not just to myself, but to others who are still trapped where I once was. There are countless men and women like me, people who still bow inside mosques with hollow hearts, who repeat words they no longer believe, who stay silent because honesty costs too much. I know that cost, but I also know the reward. One of the first people I ever helped was a young man from my hometown. He found me through a video testimony I had recorded under a different name, my face blurred for safety. His very first message was a single sentence, "Are you really one of us?" I knew exactly what he meant. We met in a public park. He was nervous, glancing over his shoulder every few seconds, speaking in whispers. I listened to his fears and doubts, and I told him what someone once told me, "You're not crazy, you're not alone, and you're not lost." 6 months later, that young man gave his life to Jesus. Today, he helps lead a small discipleship group for ex-Muslims. Sometimes I just sit in the corner at those gatherings, watching them laugh, cry, and pray freely, and I think, this is church. This is family. This is freedom. I still use a different name in public. I have to. My real name is known in places where my story would mark me as a target. But when I pray, when I worship, when I write in my journal, I use my real name, because God knows who I am. He knew me before I ever recited my first verse, before I stood in a mosque as a teacher, before I wore the mask of faith I didn't understand. He saw me, and he waited. I still wrestle with questions. I still feel the sting of loss. But my life is no longer controlled by fear. It is driven by love. Real love. The kind I never found in the eyes of men who praised my knowledge but ignored my soul. The kind I never felt bowing to words I barely understood. The kind that doesn't demand perfection but invites surrender. Jesus found me in my pride. He found me in my confusion. He found me in the ruins of an identity I couldn't repair. And he called me his, not because I earned it, not because I deserved it, but because he is good. People sometimes ask me, don't you miss your old life? And honestly, yes. I miss being a son. I miss the sound of my mother's cooking, the laughter of my younger siblings playing in the courtyard. I miss the comfort of belonging to a family. But I don't miss the lie. I don't miss the silence. I don't miss the empty rituals or the praise that hid my inner pain. Because now I live in truth. And that truth has set me free. My name is Hamza. I was once a Quran teacher. But today I follow Jesus Christ. And I am not ashamed.